Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you a step-by-step process of how I painted these two vertical fall landscape paintings. Alright, so let's get started. This picture is going to be the inspiration for my paintings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make two separate paintings that are inspired by this one picture, showing two different angles of the scene. One of them is going to have the Bucks County Playhouse and the couple that's on their canoe, and the other one is much simpler, and it's just gonna have kind of the landscape with the trees in the background and the sky and the water. And side by side, I think this would make a really nice composition. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through all my materials. I'm gonna paint on Arches watercolor paper. I'm going to be using Graham watercolor paints, and I'm just going to be using three colors for this painting. I'm going to be using ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and azo yellow. So these three colors should be enough to get the atmosphere that I see in the picture. I'm going to be using my silver black velvet brushes. I have a number 1, a number 8, and a 3/4 of an inch oval wash brush. I'm also going to be using a porcelain watercolor palette. I have some water, just a regular HB pencil for sketching, and a kneaded eraser. I'm also going to be using some sketch paper just to do my initial sketch, and some painter's tape. So first step of the process is that I made a few different sketches based on that picture. I made a very simple one here that just has very sketchy lines just to get the right compositions that I wanted. And I put kind of everything in the middle, all the elements that I wanted to be in the paintings, and I didn't like it. I don't think it's striking enough. It doesn't catch your eye enough. So I did another couple of sketches where I changed the composition. I made the one on the left side a very simple composition, and just to give a sense of scale, I'm making the sky really big and I'm giving it a lot of space. And here I'm giving the water a lot of space and the sky not as much space. So they're kind of a juxtaposition of each other. So my idea was to make the water small here, sky big, sky small, water big. I guess that makes sense. So I'm following the rule of thirds. So I kind of split it into 3 pieces. So I'm putting a bunch of my big elements that are going to attract your eye on the top third of the right side painting. And I'm going to put the ones on the left side painting on the bottom third. And then I'm going to have the couple with the canoe right there to kind of give it a little more interest and have maybe your eye travel back to that. So my intention is that this would be the focal point and then your eye travels down. So hopefully that works out well when I actually do the paintings. The next step was that I actually cut my Arches watercolor paper. It's this 9x12 watercolor paper. And I just literally cut it in the middle, like right down the middle. I split it in half and just ripped it so the edges are actually frayed. And then I sketched a super simple version. And you might not be able to even see it that well because my pencil lines are really light here. Then after I sketched, I took my kneaded eraser, I dabbed it a little bit across the page and made the lines even lighter so that they don't come through that much when I start painting. Then I took some masking fluid, which is actually another material that I forgot to mention. I'm using this Richeson Mediums liquid mask. It's what I really like. It doesn't rip my paper. So I put it on with an old brush on the parts of the painting where I want to reserve the white. And please let me know in the comments below if you would like me in future videos to go through this entire process actually live on video, or if this way of recording the videos where I just tell you what I did and then I paint kind of works for you. All right, so let's get started with the paint, because that's like the fun part, and that's what I love to do. That's my favorite part of the whole thing. So that I'm going to record the entire thing. This is my Gram paints. I'm going to squeeze a little bit of these paints on my palette. So I squeezed a little bit of my paint on the palette. I have my water. I'm going to bring back my paper with my sketches, my watercolor paper here, and I'm going to keep my sketches, my pencil sketches on one side, and my picture, my iPad, I'm going to keep it on this side so I can reference both. I can reference here, I can see where the lights and darks are. Here I can see kind of the colors. If you want to see a picture, the reference picture, go to my Instagram page. I'm going to post that on my Instagram page. That way you can see the picture for yourself. And for a list of all the materials that I just mentioned, please check below in the description. I'm going to put all the list of materials with links in case you're interested in checking them out. So I'm going to paint both of these at the same time because I want them to be cohesive and kind of look like they came from the same place. So I'm going to paint them both at the same time, side by side. I'm going to start with the left painting, and I'm going to put some clear water on the sky. So I'm going to start with the sky. And when you're painting skies, if there's any yellow in the sky, like here, you can see a sunset. There's some kind of yellow and warm colors right there in the horizon. Start with those. Start with the yellow colors rather than starting with blue, because you don't want it to turn green. You also don't want the yellow and the blue to touch, because it will turn green. And in nature, there isn't any green in the sky. So if you notice here, even though there is yellow, like the orangey color, and this grayish blue, there is no green. So we don't want to turn anything green. And that's tricky. I'm going to actually put some water in the clear water on the water section of this, because a lot of the colors that are in the sky are reflecting in the water. So I think I'm going to do part of that at the same time. All right, we wet the paper. While the water soaks in, I'm going to mix a little bit of the yellow with a little bit of the burnt sienna. I just want to make a warmer yellow, because this Aso yellow is not super warm on its own. That looks good. And I'm going to put a little bit of that mix on the bottom part of the sky of both paintings. I'm going to put that in there, and I'm going to let it travel. I'm going to let that yellow travel a little bit. And I'm going to do the same here. And I'm going to let that yellow travel. Right, so I'm just going to grab a little bit more. Put it here. So I'm just going to try to dry up all the water bleeds. And then I'm going to tilt. Now that there's no water beads, I'm going to tilt this a little bit just so it moves a little bit. There's a little bit of that reflection in the water of that yellow. All right, so I cleaned out my water, and now I'm gonna take some of this blue. It's a lot actually, so I might dilute it over here with some of the burnt sienna. I want to tone it down. That's a nice toned down blue, and I'm gonna paint the top of the sky. But I'm not gonna let this blue touch the yellow. I'm just gonna leave a little gap. You see a little gap there between the blue and the yellow. And I might put some clear water in there at some point. I'm gonna put some over here. Oh. So I'm just using some clear water to make sure the two colors have enough water to move around the page. All right, so before that dries, I actually want to make sure I have some of the foliage in the background touch a little bit of the sky. I want it to bleed into the sky. Okay. So I'm looking at my picture right now, and I just want to make sure that there are some trees here that are right on the edge, and I want that to bleed into the still wet sky. So I want that to kind of bleed in there a little bit, and I'm going to do the same here. Actually, I'm going to make this lighter. Trees in the foreground. I'm going to put some in the water while it's still wet, so it's fuzzy and there's that reflection. I'm just gonna tap a little bit. All right. So that it bleeds up. And while I was doing that, I forgot that this dried, so now I have a hard line. Yeah, it's hard to paint in watercolor 2 paintings at a time. It's like I'm trying to do too many things at once and I'm like messing up. There's foliage here, and there's some variations in the foliage. There's a little bit of yellow and red. There's some trees here. I want it all to kind of bleed into each other. I have some masking fluid that I put there to reserve some of the whites, because there are some lights, some lanterns and things on the street that I wanted to kind of preserve the light from that. So just want to do that, and putting a little bit more yellow here because there is a mix of yellow and browns and blues, and this is not meant to be realistic. It's meant to be kind of abstract and loose. Now there's a stone wall thing here that kind of separates the water from the buildings, and I also want the reflection of it, and this dried. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna spritz with a water spritzer to make sure the water's still wet. There we go. So I'm just trying to make that wet. So I want to just put some reflections in the water here to make sure we are kind of mimicking those colors right here. So it looks like a reflection. So one thing that is happening here is the playhouse that's in the background. It's actually a big white building that I masked, and I didn't mask the same section in the water reflection. So I just want to make sure that that spot, we're showing a spot that's kind of white and square, but it's not perfectly square, just to give the sense that there is a reflection. Okay, great. So I'm gonna let that dry. I'm kind of happy with how that turned out, and I'm gonna move on to the other picture. So I'm just looking at my sketch again to see where those dark areas are. I feel like I need more brown here somewhere. So I'm just gonna put more brown. There's also some trees that are sticking out. I want to make sure that those are here, and they have like little branches that you can see against the reflection of the sun. Still wet, and you can see that it's kind of feathering, and I want that to happen. Kind of give the impression there's little branches there. I'll put just some more lines here in the water. Make sure we're capturing that reflection. And now I'm gonna leave it and let it dry, and I'm gonna come back with the next layer. Okay, this is really dry now. It's nice and dry. So now I'm gonna do the next layer. I'm gonna start painting the layers that are closest to the viewer. So I want those to be warmer colors than the ones in the background. So I put more burnt sienna on my mix of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, which are basically the two main colors that I'm using for this painting. So I'm going to just put some burnt sienna here, which is, or like I should say the mix, and some in the bottom and the water edge so that it's a reflection. Now I'm going to clean my brush really well. Some people use two different brushes for this, but I'm too lazy. And I'm going to just put some clear water on the edge of that to make it kind of feather and blend in a little bit. Soften those edges. So those are trees. That's what I'm trying to depict, at least. Don't go over that too many times with clear water and a brush, because you might disturb the bottom layers. Okay, there we go. I want that to stay simple, so I'm gonna leave that, not touch it. I also don't want to disturb too much the previous layers. So now here on the right side, we have more structures. We have this stone kind of wall here that is, I want to do a variegated wash, which is like two colors. So I'm actually mixing blue and burnt sienna as I go along, just to show that variation of colors. I just want to give the impression there's a wall or something there. Don't want it to be exact. That's fine. Then the playhouse has a roof. So I'm just gonna try to paint the roof here. And the great thing about masking is that there's a chimney, a white chimney that comes down, and I don't have to worry about the edges there because it's masked. And there's a building here that's a little bit more brown, so I'm gonna grab more burnt sienna. Again, this is not precise, it's meant to be very loose and fluid. Now I'm gonna let that layer dry, and I'm gonna come back and remove the masking and finish out the painting. Okay, so the paper is dry, and I started removing the masking fluid with a rubber cement pickup. So I'm just scraping it, and it comes off. I'm gonna remove the rest, and I'll come back and continue with the next layer. All right, so I removed all the masking fluid from both paintings, and I like how it's looking so far. I'm just mixing a very, very light wash of like really light gray over here on the corner. I use that to tone down some of these dark white buildings. Put gray on either side of that chimney, on this side. Now there's a bunch of trees. So if we look at the original picture, there's all these trees that are right below the skyline. So I'm gonna use this #1 silver brush, and I'm gonna mix a dark gray. Okay, so I'm gonna grab this mix with my thin brush, and I'm gonna try to paint some tree branches here. Just pulling my brush along and making some branches. They should be thinner the further away from the trunk you get. That's easier said than done. Sometimes I find it easier to just do it backwards, like turn my paper around. And I want those lines to be super thin because they're kind of farther away in the distance. So I already painted many of the trees in the background. Now I'm making broken lines in the water to give the impression of the reflection of those branches. I'm gonna do the same on this side, and I'm gonna draw some branches on this upper side. Okay, I'm pretty happy with how the trees came out. And now I'm gonna just start sketching some other details that I see in the picture, like some of the light posts here. I'm also gonna try to paint a little bit of the shadows of these buildings to give them some dimension. Coming in there, okay. Now in this side, there's more detail. So the Bucks County Playhouse here has actual writing on the building. So I'm just gonna attempt to write. Okay, so I'm just gonna add some lines here because there is a railing of some sort, and there's some light posts, so I'm gonna just put some brush marks around these light sources that I masked out and painted yellow to make it seem like there's something there. Now I'm just gonna draw really quickly the folks that are in the canoe. I'm gonna drop in some darker paint on this edge because there's a bit more of a shadow on this edge, and I'm gonna let that color run. Again, I'm just trying to give the impression that there's people here, but not a lot of detail. I just dried this with a blow dryer, and I'm gonna just add a little bit more kind of darks to this, some shadows. All right, I'm done with most of this. I'm just putting some final details. So I'm using actually one color that I didn't mention at the beginning, which is Daniel Smith Buff Titanium, just to draw some details in the background, because this is almost like gouache, this paint. So I just want to paint some details here. I made this too dark and I needed something to lighten up. I might paint like just some marks and dots to make it seem like there's some stone here. So nothing precise or crazy. But the closer I get, the bigger they are. All right, let's take out the tape and see what it looks like. All right, so these are our two paintings. Really happy with how they came out. I think they look great. We could frame them both and put them side by side. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more videos like this. I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.